Well, good evening, everybody. Just give us a few seconds as we prep the slides real quick.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Chapter Finance Vice President webinar. My name is Keith Marciniak. Joining me tonight is Nimit Jindal. And we will spend the next about 50 minutes going through some of the do's and don'ts of serving as your chapter's Finance Vice President. For those of you joining our webinar conference for the first time, you've got a couple options when you go into audio mode. You can either use your telephone, you can use your mic and speakers, but anytime you do use that, just be respectful if you're going to raise your hand later on in the conference. We don't want you to be in a Starbucks or something like that and call upon you and have you kind of ask your question live there if there's a ton of background noise. I do think a lot of times the telephone is a lot easier. We can hear you typically a little bit better when you do that, but if you only have your mic and speakers, that's fine as well. In order to ask, I mentioned the question and answer. In order to ask a question live, you can either type your question into the question function box, and we'll kind of answer those throughout the meeting. Nimit's going to be kind of running and answering your questions as we go along, and I'll be presenting during the majority of it. There's going to be several points where we're going to stop during the webinar, and we'd really love for you to exchange information. For instance, start thinking about some of those innovative fundraising ideas that you have at your chapter. We'd love for you to share those ideas so that other chapters can kind of take advantage of some of your success. So that'll be one thing that we're definitely going to talk about during the webinar this evening. So you can type that question into the question. You can let us know what that innovative fundraiser is. Or if you want, you can raise your hand using the raise hand icon function. And throughout the webinar, as we kind of stop at those points, if you've got your hand raised, what we'll do is we'll unmute you. And we'll say, give us a second there for the webinar technology to kick in. And we'll say, all right, your name, and then just kind of start speaking and either ask your question or throw out your idea or throw out that information. Right now, there's probably about 40 people on the call, a little over 40 people on the call. So this is going to be a more intimate webinar this evening. So definitely have a good opportunity to kind of use some time for discussion. As I mentioned, Nimit is your APhA-ASP National President-elect. He is also our outgoing intern that we had over the summer. We had Grace Beck, who was our Carl Emswaller intern, as well as Nimit, who came to Washington, D.C. to work with our student development staff for a couple months there, so we were very fortunate to have him. And my name is Keith Marciniak. I've served now 16 years as the Senior Director of Student and New Practitioner Development of the association. So based upon your feedback within the survey that we asked through the registration process, the roles and responsibilities of finance vice presidents came up, budgeting as well as sources of funding, meeting and travel planning, fundraising, the all-encompassing taxes and what to do with those, were all of the things that you wanted us to touch upon during the webinar, which we'll go through these slides here. And at the end, we'll kind of talk a little about resources, and if there's anything outside of those areas that you want to know, again, type that question into that question and answer function, or definitely raise your hand. We'd love to get that to you. So we'll kick off the webinar this evening with what are the roles and responsibilities of the Finance Vice President. And you've got quite a big job, but the SVP is essential for ensuring the fiscal health and chapter operations. You're going to manage the chapter's finance, you're going to monitor spending, You're going to make sure that you have good reporting processes and just overall manage not only the budget, but your banking accounts as well. Several years ago, I was so impressed when I went out in student outreach. I actually met with a school and I found out that they actually had, as part of their chapter, believe it or not, they had investments. They had CDs that they were investing their money in and kind of, building wealth from that. So you'd be surprised. There's quite a few chapters out there that have budgets of over $100,000, and there's a vast majority of our chapters that have less than $5,000. So it definitely ranges, there's a broad range there, the amount of money as well as kind of spending power and kind of reach of the APhA-ASP chapters. And there's no one right answer to do things. So we're going to try to do the best we can to provide you with best practices as well as some best examples of how to do the job well. But it is going to be specific for every school. So as we kind of look over the responsibilities, I'll kind of break some of those initial areas down. Fiscal management, payment processing, reporting are on this slide. I myself, I love to make color-coded Microsoft Excel spreadsheets. So whatever type of, whether it be spreadsheets, whether it be online technology, or whether it be something that your university student services wants you to use, whatever you need to do in order to keep track of your finances, use what's best. I can actually provide you, if you want, I can share some spreadsheets with you. Just email me after the webinar tonight. I can kind of show you how we do some of our budgeting at APhA, with our revenue and expense line items. And we can kind of share that with you if you don't have a current system. But it's pretty easy to kind of get started within Excel, probably the easiest to use. But within fiscal management, you're going to make sure that you are the primary signatory in all financial accounts. And this needs to happen on an annual basis. You need to make sure that when you transition your position that you, the new person, as well as your chapter advisor, go to the bank if you have an outside bank account and change over who has signing authority for your checking as well as your savings account. I find all too often that this process doesn't happen, and it takes a couple months before students can actually get access to their accounts because it's the student who's already on rotations or maybe has graduated already. You want to definitely spend some time advising chapter officers on their spending and really kind of meet, if you can, a couple times with your chairs as well as the executive committee to let people know, hey, this is where you're at budget-wise, or based upon what you submitted earlier for your budget, this is where I see you where you're at right now. That'll definitely help, and hopefully if you can maintain a good amount of transparency through your time as finance president, it'll make your job easier as well as they'll appreciate you a little bit more. Maintaining positive balance for your accounts and then overseeing a finance committee. That was actually one of the questions that one of the student pharmacists asked to the registration process is, do we need a finance committee? And I would absolutely say yes. There are way too many jobs. There are way too many roles, responsibilities that are underneath not only the SVP position, but all the chapter positions within an APhA-ASP chapter. So highly, highly, highly encourage you to go out, get some more student pharmacists to come help you do the work that you need to get done. And we'll talk about some of those responsibilities thereafter. Payment processing, so invoices, checks, chapter membership dues, reimbursements for the chapter, whether it be through expense reports to the school or the reimbursement from APhA for our dues. Those are all things that you're going to do from a payment processing standpoint. And then reporting, providing your detailed report of your expenses and income, not only to the executive committee advisor, but a lot of times you have to do that through the business office as well. And then also make sure that you're continuing to do your IRS, all the tax-related reporting, and then just making sure that you're maintaining a good financial history for the organization itself. Fundraising, searching for additional funding sources as well as compliance, kind of all fit underneath that. You oversee the chapter fundraising activities and committees. You're not necessarily the person who's in charge of the fundraiser, and that's why you need committees and good, strong student leaders to kind of help run those activities as well as committees. But you want to make sure that you're making sure that they're following the rules, that if you're going to hold a raffle, that you're following all the laws, not only within your state, but within your specific county or city. If you're selling things and you maybe are from a private institution, do you have to add tax to that? These are all things that you would kind of oversee as that finance vice president. Overseeing the chapter fundraising chair, as well as the meeting travel chair. And this is something that we added to the role responsibilities a couple of years ago, was being part of the meeting planning process, and I'll go through that in just a little bit. Funding sources, researching for potential grants, as well as making sure that, if you've got something out there, some alternative funding source, that you're doing your due diligence to make sure that whatever's out there, you can obtain it. Compliance, adhering to college, university, banking, fundraising, as well as reporting. So it's not only reporting to your chapter and reporting to your chapter president or executive committee, but you're making sure that you can also report back to the university. And then budgeting, bank accounts and credit cards. So preparing the annual budget, and this typically happens in the spring, but you're going to spend a little bit of time right now making sure that all your budget requests are in for the fall semester there. Bank accounts I talked a little bit about earlier, but verifying proper procedures and signatures, making sure that you've got all your paperwork set, as well as renewing the monthly fees and knowing the fees and penalties that are associated with it. And then if you have the opportunity within your chapter to have an outside bank account and you do have a credit card or a debit card, making sure that the access to that is kind of limited, but you then also need to review those monthly statements as well as the fees, and make sure that that balance is paid off every month. So that's a quick overview of the roles and responsibilities for the FVP position. But what should my chapter budget for on an annual basis? Quite a few of you asked that question, and so hopefully some of this will resonate. But again, every chapter is just a little bit different. But those first two, meetings and then food and supplies for chapter meetings and social events, those are going to be your two major expense lines as you're kind of looking at your overall budget each year. Sending student pharmacists to the Summer Leadership Institute. So we invite one student there. So that's probably several $100s for hotel as well as airfare. Registration's only around $50. But sending that student is key to your chapter success and kind of maintaining that continuity from year to year. MRM. If you've got an opportunity to do some fundraising throughout the year, and maybe you have a point system at your chapter where student pharmacists will participate in activities, meetings, fundraisers, and through that they'll be able to achieve X number of points, which then leads to a percentage that maybe they get X amount of dollars to go to MRM or to go to annual meeting. That kind of falls underneath your jurisdiction as well. So MRM and annual meeting are probably your two biggest costs that you're going to have throughout the year. And trying to maintain a level of budget at the end of the spring semester after you've already gone to annual meeting, kind of recouping some of those losses that you've had in your budget or your overall account, and then carrying that through so that you're got a little bit of money back in your coffers to go to MRM. Those are things that you want to kind of fully be aware of. But the APhA Institute, some chapters pay for their one representative or two representatives to go, as well as State Pharmacy Association meetings, which happen quite frequently as well. Food and supplies for chapter meetings and social events, that's your next probably largest cost. As we all know, pizza can be pretty expensive. But when you add on that you have to use the university's Aramark or one of those contracted food suppliers, then it gets even more expensive. So I encourage you to not only follow the rules, but see if you can get creative in the types of things that you offer. Maybe if you know that you're going to order food for X number of meetings at the beginning of the year, maybe you can negotiate a little bit of a better price because you'll be able to say, hey, we're going to give you this business on these specific months. Would you be able to help us out? But NPCC prizes as well as setup, running that video contest that you do with FarmFlix, any patient care supplies that you have to go out and do patient care projects. I know with the policy vice presidents, they want to print policy postcards and kind of use those with their patients that they meet. Those are all things that are going to come out of the chapter budget. Something I'd also recommend that you budget, and maybe that's kind of thought about afterwards, is your executive committee retreats as well as your executive committee meetings. Having a little bit of money in there to make it a little bit easier for you guys. It's always nice for all your exec to have lunch, something along that line. So definitely budget that, and then just a nice way to thank some of your members is through prizes and giveaways, which I encourage you to do. So as you're developing your budget, definitely collaborate with your executive committee and committee chairs, which I kind of mentioned earlier. Transparency is definitely key when it comes to your position. as well as access. They need to be able to contact you as best as possible. Budget submissions can be a little bit tricky. It's something that not all chapters do, and I'm not sure that they do it all that effectively, but whatever system that you have for your chapter chairs or your patient care project chairs, they need to let you know 3 basic things. It's how much money do you need to initiate whatever event you're doing, how much there's going to be in expenses that you're going to have, and then is there any potential for income? I also asked, and I talked about this last night with the president, is you want to know the why. What's the purpose? What's the value of the event that they're going to be doing? You're not going to be the judge and jury, but you just want to make sure that when people come back and ask you, or the executive committee comes back and asks you a little bit later, like, yeah, this patient care project needed to happen. We needed to be part of this health fair. You know, they're making a difference via X, Y, Z. That'll help not only as you're kind of going through and budgeting throughout the year to help prioritize some of the events that you're doing, but by doing that, then you also can report back to the school or college of pharmacy to let them know the impact that they're making on the local community. Dates and deadlines, you need to be a stickler about those, and then making sure that you keep great records and receipts. That's super important for your job to make sure you're keeping all that. Now, as you're kind of developing your budget and you're kind of looking at, you know, fundraising and funding sources, I threw this in here because this came up in a webinar last night, but within APHA's process, we collect all of the dues for the APhA-ASP chapters. And then at the end of the month of October, November, December, January, February, and then at June, what we do is we send back all of the chapter dues, as well as we send the state dues directly to the State Pharmacy Association. The vast majority of our chapters participate in this. However, not all do. Your chapter has to opt into this process, and you do that through contacting our membership department and actually filling out a specific form to do that. In addition, you then also have to supply us with your current chapter bank account, because we don't just send you a check back. What we do is we send an electronic funds transfer back to your account. So we need to have your correct routing number as well as checking account number. Now, I will let you know that this usually does not work if you have a university account shared with the university. A lot of times it just kind of goes into a big university fund, and then you have kind of like a sub account underneath that, and a lot of times the money just kind of doesn't get routed to that. Or we even see this with the school or college pharmacy business office. A lot of times the money's been sent over, but it hasn't been fully transferred to your account. It's kind of in that main account there. So knowing and kind of going on to pharmacist.com, printing out your membership report, printing out your dues report is something I highly encourage you to do at the end of, if you can, every month, especially when you're doing your fall and spring campaign, just to know how much money you're expecting to come back. And then there's one other thing in there, that's the $3 and $1 rebate. So every student pharmacist who signs up for membership prior to October 15th, we're going to give your chapter $3 back. And then everybody who signs up before November 1st, we're going to give you $1 back. So, you know, having your fall drive early definitely will help out in that process. And everybody who signs up in the spring also gets that as well. So I mentioned some funding sources. Grants are something I'm really looking for chapters to kind of look outside the box. I mean, we've got some pretty phenomenal student pharmacists that are out there who are doing some great research projects, and are working with some phenomenal faculty that could really mentor you to help boost up grants. And, you know, they write grants, your faculty members write grants all the time. So why not think about that to do with your APhA-ASP chapter? Now, this isn't something to start next week. This is something that I would encourage you to kind of put into your system, maybe to implement next year. But APhA Foundation, we've got immunization grants that we give out. The Cardinal Health Foundation, quite a few of the chapters on this call actually receive money from the Cardinal Health Foundation. Your school or college of pharmacy, a lot of times in the university themselves, they've got money that they provide from a grant perspective. So federal government is a big one. But if you can, I'd encourage you to start looking at that as an opportunity, and maybe, you know, something that you can kind of fund through a couple years. Maybe you want to partner with a faculty member at your school and college of pharmacy and utilize the strengths of your APhA-ASP chapter, because you provide the manpower to kind of do those grants, and maybe you help fulfill that out in the community, and they kind of help assist with maybe whatever clinical or external type of thing that you need to do. But Dean's office, usually that's one of the first places to go, especially when it comes to funding. The Dean's office is usually pretty good. It's the Dean of Student Services, and it's usually tied to the Student Government Association. The vast majority of schools out there do get funding and are able to apply for funding through their SGA. The one thing that I've learned throughout the years is just make sure that you get that in as detailed as possible and as early as possible, because that money does go quick. And I think the hard thing with working with the SGAs or your dean's office is quite a few times, they look at APhA-ASP as the same club as all of the other organizations that are out there, and kind of really proving the value that you provide to your community is something I'd really hit home, that your organizations most of the time is 2 to 3 times larger than the next organization. So articulating your reach, articulating the impact that you guys make on the community, that usually helps quite a bit. Business Development Office is another area which I know a lot of chapters spend some quality time with at their school and college of pharmacy. Through the Business Development Office, you just don't want to go to your Rite Aid or go to your Walgreens or go to your Walmart and say, hey, would you please sponsor our APhA-ASP chapter? That's a no-no. You want to make sure that you contact the school's Business Development Office to see what relationship they have with one of those outside organizations, because chances are they've got a standing kind of donation from them each year. So if you can, talk to them first, make sure that you're following their rules, and don't solicit any support without finding out what you can actually go out there and solicit. But the Business Development Office at quite a few schools and colleges of pharmacy kind of have taken over the career fair, or they've taken over the health fair, and they've partnered with APhA-ASP to provide that good benefit to the local community. And so you're able to receive some of the funding from that event, or receive that fundraising, help out with going out and reaching out for those fundraising dollars through your Business Development Office. So I encourage, if you don't have a relationship with them, spend some time with them. And then make sure you're looping your advisors and consulting the yearly calendar in there, just to kind of make sure you're doing your due diligence. So meeting travel, I talked about that at the beginning, but you've got to run that committee pretty well and keep tabs on kind of what's happening. But planning chapter trips, keeping up to date about important deadlines. MRM, for instance, we need everybody to sign up before October 6th in order to get that early bird deadline. But coordinating chapter hotel arrangements, arranging travel to and from the meeting, those are all kind of fit within your purview. Again, you're not doing all the work. You should have a committee to help you doing that. But you should be that liaison to the MRMC or the liaison to APhA headquarters in order to kind of tell us what's going on. And then just make sure that throughout the process that everybody's following all the rules, you're adhering to the chapter reimbursement policies, and that you make sure that your deadlines for refunds and stuff are being followed. So I'm going to stop there, and I would love for somebody to kind of raise your hands and kind of jump in and let us know about some innovative fundraisers. We've got a couple people who have already kind of checked in here, and again, we'd love for this to be kind of an open conversation, but this next one we want to feature you guys. So Nimit, I will turn it over to you to see what we've got questions-wise.
Hey, Keith. Looks like I'm still having some technical difficulties on my end here. I'm not seeing any questions that you might be seeing.
All right, sounds good. All right. So it doesn't look like anybody has their hands raised at this point. I do have some comments about instead of, thank you, Crystal. So instead of having full food at your events or your chapter meetings, she said consider using snack packs. They're cheaper, and you can actually have the snack pack sponsored by a specific company or grocery chain, something along that lines. You can put the sponsor's information in the packet as well. So we actually go to a leadership conference each year where instead of getting full lunch, what they do is they give us a little box, and there's a lot of good goodies in there, as well as water bottles that have branding on them as well. So great point. All right. So I don't see anybody. So Emily Lee, I'm going to unmute you here. All right, that doesn't seem to be working as well. All right, Caitlin Jarvis.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. One of the fundraisers that I came up with last year wasn't exactly for this organization, but it was actually very profitable. We called it Pilgrims, and we did it around Thanksgiving time to kind of go off of the name Pilgrims. What we did, I work at a pharmacy, and so I just asked for donations of vials, probably about like 20 dram, some vials and lids, and then we got either M&Ms or Skittles. So we would sell these vials filled with M&Ms or Skittles, and they actually went really well. I think we raised about $400 off of that.
That's awesome. So how much were your hard costs, do you figure?
Hard costs, I wasn't actually the one dealing with it, but just seeing from the candies, it was about, because I go to Sam's Club, it was about $30, $40 for the candy, but we did over 250 vials.
Very nice. Great suggestion. What school do you go to?
I go to Palm Beach Atlantic Gregory School of Pharmacy.
Very nice. Cool. Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate it. Did
Of
you have
course.
anything else?
That was just the biggest one that I did. We just do like regular bake sales as well, but I wanted to be a little more innovative this year.
Okay, cool. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for jumping in here.
You're welcome.
All right. So I'm going to jump back into the conversation here through the webinar. If you have things that you want to kind of mention, or if you've got a great idea, we'd love to hear about it. But as fundraisers go, evaluating the fundraiser, the effort that you put into it, determining the fundraisers to repeat, kind of doing a good assessment is vital to your position kind of from year to year. You want to actually get the things that are the most profitable, but actually take the least amount of time. So that's why I was asking, one of those hard costs by going to Sam's Club and getting a discount there will definitely help out. Getting sponsorship to put on some of those other things will help that company get their name out, but then you can also bring in some money from that as well. And a lot of times the sponsorship dollars usually go further than the actual sales dollars as well. I encourage when you're fundraising to double dip as much as possible. And what I mean by that is by having a talent show or by having a game night. That's great and all, and you charge an entrance fee to come in, or you charge teams an entrance fee to pay. However, selling pizza, selling popcorn, selling soda, things that you can all purchase at bulk and then resell, that'll definitely make you a lot more money. And then in addition to that, if you can have a raffle or something along that lines, or have maybe a donated item from your collegiate sports team, maybe the head coach or something along that lines, and maybe auctioning that off at that event, or maybe auctioning it off at multiple events. Try to have as many layered fundraisers as you can, all on top of each other. That'll definitely help increase your funds, but it just makes it a little bit easier so you're not having a bake sale every other week. Developing new fundraising ideas and evaluating their applicability. The APhA has a full list of our fundraisers, which is on our website under the Finance Vice President section. We have sales and raffles, athletic events, tournaments. I like the athletic events quite a bit. One of our chapters has been conducting a golf tournament for many, many years, and they bring in upwards of $10,000 or more by conducting their golf tournament. It's something that the school has been doing for a while, and they not only have entrance fee for the golfers, but they've got some of the holes that are sponsored, where the supporter can kind of stand there, welcome people, or they've got a sign out there for that specific company. They'll hire a outside company to come in and run a hole-in-one contest or a longest drive contest. Through each of those, the separate company usually doesn't cost too much, but they offer a large prize on top of that. It's kind of done through insurance. But not only that, but they travel the golf carts around. They sell beverages. They sell food. They've got an end of golf tournament reception or luncheon, depending on what you want to have with prizes and stuff like that. So very nice event. I've been to a couple of these throughout the years here. And if you can corner that market through your APhA-ASP chapter, I highly encourage it. It takes all year to plan, but the benefits are great. My next kind of favorite fundraisers are those community builders. Anything you can do to raise money in addition to building a good rapport with your faculty, with your administration, with other student pharmacists, and kind of building those relationships is key. And so, the Beard Challenge during November, you're not only supporting a local cause to, focus on men's health issues, but if you want to make it into a fundraiser, you can have, the guys donate money, and whomever has the longest beard, the most hair growth, something along that lines during that time, they can get the money. But lipstick battles, scavenger hunts, and auctions, I personally like auctions the most because you've got a very low overhead of cost of those. A lot of the services are definitely donated. Years ago, one of the deans up in the New England area, he had a house on the Cape, and what he would do is he would allow the students or whomever bid on that specific item, he'd allow them to stay at his home on the Cape for the weekend. So that actually made quite a bit of money. But you'd be surprised. My wife is a faculty member at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill here, and she every year, has people go get their nails done, and so she'll bring them out to the local nail salon, and they'll have a couple drinks and have a good time there. And surprisingly, there was a foursome of guys last year that went to go do it too. So you'd be surprised how much money that you can make from that. Career fairs or interview fairs, a lot of the schools kind of put that on, but again, you've got manpower. Leverage that manpower as many times as you can when you're going to work with your school or college of pharmacy, and kind of working with the school to either help set up the interviews, to help the companies come in, help set up the day, something along that lines will definitely help with those career fairs. Do bring in a lot of money as well. So in addition to some of the other fundraisers that are out there, partner, I was reading about this earlier, I actually heard about this a while ago from an innovative perspective. A local group partnered, and this wasn't a school of pharmacy, but a local group partnered with the MedFlight service within their university health system, and they actually went out and found donors to sponsor a MedFlight. So it's like, hey, would you like to help save somebody's life? What we're going to do is partner with the local MedFlight service, part of the university hospital, and it was, around $800, $900, something along that lines, but they were able to help split the profits between that organization and the MedFlight, and they were doing some good. So partnering with a local children's hospital, I've heard of many of these, but video game contests and stuff like that, but maybe don't use some of the new gaming systems that are out there. Try to focus maybe on the old school Sega or Nintendo games and have kind of a retro look at it. And then some of the other things, because I've got 3 little kids at home that love to kick and throw stuff around, renting a radar gun and kind of measuring how fast people can throw a kickball or kick a soccer ball, or throw a baseball. Those are all things kind of that are outside of what you're normally doing, but those can be added on to one of the current fundraisers that you're out there doing. So anything you can kind of do to think outside the box would be awesome. So I don't really see anybody else kind of raising their hands here, but if you have stuff that you want to bring forward, definitely bring that up in a little bit. So The Accidental Fundraiser is a book that we utilize with our Midyear regional meeting coordinators every year. It's a good read. It's a quick read. And if you're kind of looking for some fundraising ideas or just kind of structure processes, I encourage you to do that as well. There's a couple other websites, fundraisingideas.org, Fast Track Fundraising. I was really surprised in Pinterest just the number of fundraisers that they have on there, particularly like to the fraternity fundraising section. So if you have a Pinterest account or If you don't, you can kind of just access it through the back way. I encourage you to go do that and kind of look through some of those fundraisers. And then through P.com, I mentioned earlier some of those resources that we have, but under chapter finances, we've got our fundraising list that are up there and kind of took some of the best ideas that your schools and colleges of pharmacy are doing. So as your finance vice president, you need to train your fundraising committee and have as many people as fundraisers you can have. People definitely want to give. They want to give their time. They want to give their resources. They want to be part of something that's bigger than them. But fundraising is about building relationships. And the more you can build a relationship with somebody, the better they'll understand the purpose of what you're doing. Just attended a conference last week, and the speaker was talking about fundraising and how if people just made cold calls, how much money the fundraising department would make, and it was a very little amount, let's say maybe 10%. And then if you go and actually, talk to the person and, kind of in person, it brings in a little bit more. But then if you not only train the staff, but then bring some of the members of who you're going to benefit to have them come in and actually talk to the staff physically, what happens is you build that relationship and you create that bond so that now the people who are going out and fundraising have a better idea of what they're doing, better idea what the value and the purpose is. And, you get 10 times the amount of resources to come back, because not only the people who you're having sell the fundraiser know a lot more about it, but they're being then able to kind of carry that message forward as well. So I encourage you to do as best as you can when you're building relationships. Writing thank you cards, making sure that documentation and then evals are part of the process as well. All too often we kind of just look at the bottom line, but there might be some other things that we can do when we're evaluating our fundraisers. Some unintended consequences of a fundraiser, or maybe you need to partner with a different patient care project in order to make your fundraiser work a little bit better. But definitely following those rules and regulations. So, all right. Again, if you've got some fundraising ideas, innovative ideas, I'd love to hear some of those. I'll keep moving on in the webinar this evening. The last thing that I kind of want to spend some heavy time on are chapter taxes. I'm just going to kind of run through my normal spiel that I give, but APHA is a 501c6 not-for-profit organization. We're exempt from federal income tax, but not from state sales tax. And all of our chapters nationally are considered to be subordinates of APHA, and therefore you have to file your taxes every year through the IRS. This is for every student organization. I'm sure you're a member of 3 or 4 different orgs, and APHA is probably the only stickler that abides by this, but we do follow the rules, and we want to make sure that APHA's tax ID status is never harmed because one of our chapters isn't following the rules. So we do have 2 methods of filing taxes. The first is your chapter files directly with your school or college of pharmacy or with your university. So that means you provide them with your balance sheet at the end of the year, as well as any descriptions of some of those expenses or some of the revenue that you received. For the donations, you're going to need to obtain some information. A lot of times, groups, if you want to work with an outside org to say sell things at Chick-fil-A, or if you need a donation, what they're going to need is your tax ID number in order to have you work with them or actually have them cut you a check. And that's pretty common practice within business. So knowing what your tax ID number is, and whether it's either through the school or if you, through the second point here, file taxes directly through APHA's group exemption, you're going to still have to provide them with a tax ID number. Now there's benefits and drawbacks of both ways. Depending if you're from a state school, you are exempt most of the time from state sales tax. Again, I'm not an accountant. I'm not a licensed professional here. This is only the information that I've kind of learned throughout the years. So definitely encourage you to speak with your school's business office and your school's attorney. But for the most part, you can kind of have whatever tax status the school has when you go out and do your chapter activities. Through under APHA, it's kind of important to note if you want, say, Walgreens to cut you guys a check for your APhA-ASP chapter, and they're like, well, we want to make sure that we can write that off. Unfortunately, they can't write that off. Because we are not a 501c3 organization, which is a foundation or charitable organization. So those donations or in-kind donations are not tax deductible. But each year, we file on the 15th day of the 5th month after the close of our tax year, which is our fiscal year. So it just so happens that APHA has a January 1st through December 31st fiscal year. So we actually file all of our taxes as a business on May 15th. So it's not April 15th like the personal taxes. The businesses get a little bit longer. So it's the 15th of May. And usually around March time, what we'll do is we'll send out notification to your chapter advisors, letting them know that they have to go file taxes with the IRS. And again, it's whatever route you use, and you let APHA know. So you'd supply that information back to your school, and maybe your school is actually on a June 1st to May 31st or a July 1st to June 30th calendar. So you might file yours at a different time, but just be aware of when you need to file those taxes. But we'll send you a notice to let you know. And for those chapters that file under APHA's group exemption, if you do less than $50,000 worth of business, all you really need to do is go online to the IRS website, fill out a quick postcard, basic contact information, and send it in. If you have more than $50,000 worth of business that you do through your APHA chapter, then that's when you have to actually fill out a little bit of a longer form, similar to what you have to do for your personal taxes. And in that case, I encourage you to seek some advice from either the business office, or I know some chapters have gone and had a CPA help them fill that out. But student development staff will be happy to help you here and do whatever we can. Now, I will let you know that if you do not file your taxes, bad things will happen to your chapter. Definitely some doom and gloom. That seems to be an occurrence. We at least have 3 or 4 chapters every year that unfortunately receive that letter from the IRS saying, hey, your tax ID number has been revoked because you haven't filed taxes for 3 consecutive years. And what they'll do is they'll levy some fines against you. I've had chapters that had to pay $2,500 in fines in order to kind of get their tax status back. Some other schools have had to dig through all of their paperwork since the chapter was first formed, pull out their original bylaws and make sure that they send them to them, as well as any back bank statements and stuff like that. So it does get kind of hairy, and it does get expensive and very time consuming. So I encourage you, for the benefit of the 3 years from now, chapter vice president at your chapter, just file the taxes every year. It's kind of easy. So, all right. So we'll go through some Q&A here. Want to bring up Andrew's question. It says, what have other chapters done to promote Pharmacist Month in the past? So Andrew, I'm going to unmute you here if you can.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you help clarify your question?
Yeah, it was so last year we were looking at how to promote October is National Pharmacist Month as a way to build into fundraising. We did shirts, but it wasn't like super popular, and I was just seeing what other chapters have done that has been successful.
And you're talking about the shirts that you printed yourself, or did you order them from APHA?
No, we printed ourselves.
Okay. I've seen chapters do T-shirts the most, but they've also kind of sent like little mugs or nice gifts that they would put together, small little gifts that chapter members or faculty members can purchase, and you would deliver them to either a local pharmacist or another faculty member to kind of go through to do that. Just kind of from a sales standpoint, it's kind of more of a gifting type of thing. I've seen that. Pin sales have been popular during the month. Things related to your professional development, i.e., the lab coats, patches, any of those kind of things I've seen during that time frame. But when you get into the having to purchase bulk products from an external vendor, and then you have to then resell them, you really kind of have to consider all the costs that are related to it. But those thank you bags definitely go a big way. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps a lot, because last year we had ordered bulk for shirts in the anticipation that we would sell them over a couple years, and that's what we're looking at right now. So I was just seeing if there's any other ideas or any other comments that people had to kind of promote fundraising during that month?
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely, if you can, early in the process, I'd encourage you to do pre-sales. There's a lot of online vendors that you can order and have them pay them directly, and you get the shirt shipped. But let me see if Caitlin and Ashley, they're raising their hands as well. Maybe they have some comments. Ashley, go ahead.
Hey, so I'm Ashley. I'm from Campbell University. And one thing that we do on terms of the shirts that you guys were just mentioning, one thing that we do is we do a past our top 100 exam, and it typically has a camel on it, and it's got different drug names kind of all over it. And it's kind of a, I guess you would say, push towards the P1s. So once they take their top 100 exam, and I know different chapters do this different schools do this different way. So if you don't have a top 100 exam, that would be a little bit different. But that's always a big seller for us, and we can buy in bulk. We've bought in bulk in all different colors, several hundred at a time, because every single year we know that P1s are going to want to buy that shirt after they pass their top 100, just kind of as a monumental kind of thing. So that's always an option if you want to stay with the t-shirt route. But I know a lot of chapters do t-shirts, and I think it's slowly everyone kind of gets overwhelmed and says, okay, I don't need any more t-shirts. But that is one that's always successful because it's something that we've had for several years and everyone knows it's coming.
Right, very cool. Caitlin, I'm gonna unmute you as well.
Okay, so one of the t-shirt ideas that we have is we have the nerd, but it's the pharmacy symbol, the RX, instead of just a regular R. And there's also like a little pill on it as well. Also, there was tumblers that were sold that had our school logo on it. We did have, I think they did just raise the price by 7% because the school does charge us 7% for having the logo. But it was still pretty good, and I see people using the tumblers all the time for coffee, especially for 8 a.m. classes.
That's a great idea. We have one of our student pharmacists. In public areas, post thank you signs. You'll pay $2 to recognize someone who has influenced your pharmacy path, like a mom, mentor, pharmacist, or faculty member. Probably something very similar to you see, like the Muscular Dystrophy Association kind of does those throughout the time there. So that's actually a great idea. That's a low cost for you and probably mostly profit. Great. So hopefully, Andrew, that helps you out there. We had some other comments that were kind of brought in here. So instead of raffling stuff off, i.e. a TV or a Fitbit, we raffle off services at our chapter. So house cleaning, dog walking, tickets to sporting events, maybe at the university. So try taking a look at some of the events, which is a great idea. Some other comments that kind of bring, so show off talent of student pharmacists, students who paint or make pottery, or who are a photographer partner, either at a craft fair or an event. That's an absolutely great suggestion. One of our APhA-ASP chapters down in Region 3, they actually have a very good photographer who's part of their executive committee, and what they do is they took professional headshots of their chapter leaders and of their members, whomever wanted to have them, and they utilize that as a fundraiser. So those professional headshots come in very handy when you're actually going out and trying to look for that new position or that new job there. Some other points that folks have made is contacting local reps or distributors for donations of supplies, i.e. a glucose monitoring company for whether they be test strips or monitoring strips, monitors. You'd be surprised how many companies might have a little bit of an extra supply that you'll be able to kind of go out and partner with, especially because you're going out for a great purpose. So those are all great comments. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So, all right, we will close out here. I want to make sure that everybody is kind of aware. We do have our Engage platform. Engage is APhA's kind of peer-to-peer networking opportunity. Every student pharmacist who is a chapter leader at your school or college of pharmacy has automatically been uploaded into your chapter position-specific Engage. So Right now, there's a Finance Vice President Engage community, and we'd love for you to continue the conversation. Ask innovative fundraisers, ideas, that sort of thing through that. If you are participating, or if you know some of the other chapter members that maybe haven't signed up yet, we've got 2 more nights actually, of webinars, but Communications Vice President's webinars coming up next this evening. But we still have our MVPs, our Patient Care Vice Presidents, as well as our International Vice Presidents. And then on Thursday afternoon during lunch, we're going to do chapter advisors. So hopefully you're finding value in this process here. Quick little promo for MRM. Early bird registration rate is $125. That ends on October 6th. That then goes up to $165. But MRM, we've had a phenomenal lineup for you coming up this fall, and these are still only the only meetings nationally within pharmacy that are designed exclusively for student pharmacists. So I encourage you to attend at least one MRM during your time as a student. Those are the dates for the MRMs for each of them. We've got some pretty cool cities out there, but we're looking at the 13th through the 15th, the 27th through the 29th of October. Those are 2 big weekends. And then our final weekend in Pittsburgh, Charleston, and Phoenix will be there November 3rd through the 5th. So visit mrm.pharmacist.com. And then if your chapter hasn't signed up for an outreach visit, please let us know, because we'd love to come to your chapter and kind of talk to you guys one-on-one and have an officer come. So hopefully this was helpful for y'all. If you have any questions, please email us at apha-asp@aphanet.org. And definitely check out the website. We'll be updating things as the fall progresses. But thank you so much for listening tonight, and we will end the webinar.